Good afternoon. I want to thank you all for coming and for this tremendous outpouring of support for our cause and for those fighting to oppose the regime all over the country and the world. 1,000 days have passed from the missile attacks against a civilian airliner over the skies of Tehran. 176 human beings and an unborn child were murdered. Brides and grooms were murdered. Children were murdered. Many of the passengers were students with promising futures for Canada, for Iran. They all lost their lives senselessly 1,000 days ago today. And where do we stand? Where does the world stand? Where is justice in all of the politics, legal wranglings, negotiations, and bureaucracy? The families of the victims were caught up in the aftermath of an atrocity that is unprecedented in the history of aviation. Despite their grief and anguish, the majority of the families have stood together along this unbearably difficult path. They tried everything within their means to unveil the truth, but unfortunately, they were not the ones to decide their own destiny. The real stakeholders in this heinous crime have no power to decide, have no rights to information, and have no place at the negotiation table, not even their legal representatives. To fairly understand the fate of the victims' families, we must consider the circumstances and events that have developed over the past 1,000 days. The Canadian government has marked January 8 as a National Day of Remembrance for aviation victims every year going forward. Many dependents were helped to resettle in Canada thanks to the work of this association and IRCC through Minister Mendicino and Fraser, and scholarships were dedicated to university students in the name of the victims. These are welcome actions that will help to keep the memory of the victims alive, which is one of our association's 3 core objectives. But what about the truth? What about transparency? What about accountability? What about the free words commitment to justice and human rights? Just yesterday, officials of the Islamic Republic are now officially sanctioned by the Canadian government, which is a welcome action, even if long overdue. But sanctions are just one step of many steps that must be taken in order to achieve results. Within 5 hours after the shooting down of Flight PS752, when bulldozers grazed the site and destroyed evidence, the gears of justice must have engaged. From the moment that it was clear that the IRGC fired the missiles that brought down Flight PS752, the absurdity of leaving the investigation to the perpetrators must have been addressed. From the moment witnesses and victims' families were harassed, intimidated, and persecuted, an impartial international investigative body must have engaged with the whole affair. 55 Canadian citizens were murdered. Another 83 victims had close ties to Canada. But despite our efforts, the RCMP to date refuses to open a domestic criminal case. The ICAO has yet to condemn the Islamic Republic's breaches of its conventions with an absurd claim of neutrality. 1,000 days of lip service. 1,000 days of empty, devoid of action. 1,000 days of grief with no closure. Let us take a step back and look at the big picture. Let us consider the roadmap to justice. We don't want to hear about the complexity and delicacy of the matter. We are the biggest stakeholders, and by now, 1,000 days later, we know all too well that the road to justice for us is not an easy, short, or simple one. We demand a clear roadmap with concrete action. We demand empathy backed up by real turns in the gears of justice. We are not lawyers or diplomats or politicians. We are a collective of grieving families who deserve reparations that include the truth, justice, and closure, not empty apologies or financial compensation. Here is what must be done. 1. Our case must be tabled at the ICAO Council without delay and with urgency. 2. We must prepare our case to the International Court of Justice. 3. Canada must support the association's submission to the International Criminal Court through a state referral or a letter of support. 4. The IRGC must be on the terrorist list without delay. 5. Canada must launch an official investigation into the Islamic Republic's shameless and open money laundering activities. 6. Canada must launch an official investigation into how Islamic Republic agents, security and military personnel, politicians and their families have made Canada a safe haven, and they must be expelled without delay. As we stand here on the hallowed grounds of Parliament Hill, in the heart of Canadian democracy, I call on parliamentarians of all parties and sprites to help us push forward in making these demands a reality. 1,000 days, and despite our frustration, we will stand with you and continue our lawful efforts to make sure that Canada will not be a safe haven for our tormentors. We shall continue our efforts with increasing resolve, and even after 1,000 days, our pain, our shattered lives, our success, or even failure to get results, to unveil the truth and get justice, can only pave the way for freedom and justice in Iran. No matter how long it takes, no matter how long it takes, we stand firm for justice and human rights. We shall never forget, nor shall we ever forgive. Thank you.